The battle was over, and the land lay in ruin. The air was thick with smoke, and the faint cries of the dying echoed in the distance. Amidst the chaos, a man lay on the cold ground, his body broken and battered. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath a struggle. The world around him blurred as his vision faded, and all that remained was the overwhelming weight of pain. He had fought until he couldn't fight anymore. His body was covered in deep cuts and bruises. His arm, once strong, now felt like a dead weight, useless at his side. His sword was nowhere to be found, and all he could do was stare at the sky, where the clouds rolled like waves, dark and heavy with the promise of another storm. The man tried to move, but his limbs refused to obey. His hands shook with the effort to push himself up, but all he managed was a faint twitch. His chest ached, each breath searing through him like fire. The cold of the earth beneath him seeped into his bones, and his body trembled with the knowledge that this was the end of his life, the end of everything he had fought for. He could hear the distant sounds of battle still raging, the clashing of swords, the cries of men, the roar of beasts, but it all seemed so far away now. He was alone. His comrades, his enemies, they had all fallen, one by one. He had given everything for the cause, but it hadn't been enough. His mind flashed with memories of the war, the faces of those he had known, and then, as if a final cruel joke, his thoughts turned to the people he would never see again. His family, his friends, his life. A cold, bitter smile formed on his lips as he lay there, waiting for the darkness to claim him. But then, something changed. A figure appeared before him, stepping from the haze of smoke and dust. The man's vision was blurry, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if he was seeing things or if death had already begun to take him. The figure was tall, draped in a cloak that shimmered with the colors of the storm. Her presence seemed to push back the darkness, and for a fleeting second, the man felt a strange warmth in her presence. She knelt down beside him, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his heart race. There was no fear in her eyes, only a strange, quiet resolve. Her features were sharp, almost otherworldly, and her skin glowed with an ethereal light. Her hair, long and flowing, seemed to move with a life of its own, shimmering like silver threads in the light of the fading sun. "Touch my spear and live," she whispered softly, her voice like the wind through the trees. Calm and gentle. The man's heart skipped a beat. Was he hearing things? Was he delirious from the pain? He could barely focus on the words, but there was something in her gaze that held him in place, something that made him believe that, somehow, he could survive. His hand moved slowly, almost instinctively, towards the spear she held out to him. It was unlike any weapon he had ever seen. Its shaft was black as night, with glowing symbols etched into the surface. The spearhead was sharp, gleaming with a light that seemed to pulse with power. The woman's hand guided his to it, her touch gentle but firm. And when his fingers made contact with the cold surface of the spear, a surge of energy rushed through him. It was like nothing he had ever felt before. A warmth spread through his chest, and suddenly his vision cleared. The pain in his body faded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of strength and clarity. His heart, which had been beating so slowly, now thudded with life. He felt the air fill his lungs as if for the first time. The weakness that had once gripped him was gone. He was alive again, but as the energy flowed through him, something unexpected happened. The woman's expression shifted, and a faint, sad smile appeared on her lips. The light in her eyes began to fade, and she let out a soft gasp as if struggling to hold on to something, perhaps her own life. Before he could react, the woman's body shuddered, and she collapsed beside him. Her hand slipped from his, and he looked down in horror as he saw her life force slowly draining away. He tried to reach for her, to pull her back, but it was too late. Her once bright eyes were now dull, and her breath came in shallow gasps. The warmth that had filled his body was now gone, replaced by an empty cold. The man could only watch in disbelief as the life drained from her, her sacrifice leaving him alive, but her spirit slipping away with each passing second. He had lived again, but at what cost? The world around him seemed to stop as he cradled her in his arms, helpless and lost. The man's heart pounded in his chest as he held the dying woman in his arms. His mind was a whirlwind, filled with confusion and disbelief. Just moments ago, he had felt death's cold grip tightening around him, but now, his body was alive again, full of strength he hadn't known in years. Yet, as he gazed down at the warrior who had saved him, a heavy guilt began to settle over him. He had taken her life in exchange for his own, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not worthy of this second chance. Her breath was shallow, each one weaker than the last. He could feel the warmth of her body fading with each passing second. Her face was pale now, her once glowing skin becoming lifeless, and her eyes, which had once been filled with a quiet intensity, were slowly losing their light. His hands trembled as he tried to hold her closer, but there was nothing he could do. His strength, the very strength she had given him, was now useless in saving her. Desperation filled him. He had to do something, anything. He had to repay her, to honor her sacrifice. His gaze darted around, looking for a sign, for something that could help him understand what had just happened. But the world around him was silent, the distant sounds of battle a mere echo in the background. "Please, don't go," he whispered, his voice hoarse and broken. But there was no response, only the sound of her labored breathing, growing softer with each passing moment. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He couldn't let himself cry, not yet. Not when she had given him everything. His mind raced through everything he had ever learned about life and death. Was there a way to reverse what had happened? Was there a way to give her back the life she had so willingly sacrificed? But no answers came. No magic, no rituals. Only the cold truth of the situation. She was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As the seconds ticked by, the man felt an overwhelming sense of loss. It wasn't just the woman in his arms, but the world itself, which now felt hollow and empty. What was the point of survival if it came at the cost of someone else's life? He had been granted a gift, a second chance, but at what cost? How could he go on knowing that someone had to die for him to live? In that moment, a memory surfaced, a conversation he had once had with an old mentor. The price of life, the mentor had said, is often paid in blood. But the real test is not in the taking of life, it's in how you live with the cost. The words echoed in his mind, and for the first time, he understood their meaning. This wasn't just about survival. This was about making sure that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. He couldn't let her death be the end. He had to honor it. His grip tightened around her, and he gently laid her down, placing a hand over her chest as if to offer comfort. The world seemed to hold its breath as he made a silent vow. He would not let this be the end of her story. Her sacrifice would not be forgotten. And with that vow, the man stood, his heart heavy but determined. He was no longer just a survivor. He had become something more, a bearer of a legacy. A man who would carry the weight of her death and live with the purpose she had given him. The journey ahead would not be easy, but he would not falter. Not while she had given him the strength to continue. The weight of the woman's death hung over him like a dark cloud, suffocating every thought. With each step he took, her sacrifice seemed to echo in his mind, a constant reminder of the life she had given him. But as he walked away from the place where she had died, something in him began to change. A fire began to kindle in his chest, a burning desire to understand, to find out why she had chosen him, and why, out of all the people in that war, had she given everything for a man she didn't know. The world around him was quiet, the destruction of the battlefield still fresh, and yet he felt no peace. His body, which had once been heavy with exhaustion, now surged with newfound strength. Every breath felt different, filled with vitality. But it was a vitality that felt foreign to him, like a gift he hadn't earned. His mind wandered to the warrior woman. Her sacrifice had been so selfless, so full of meaning, but why had she chosen him? He was no hero. He had only been another soldier in a war he barely understood, fighting for causes that felt as empty as the field he had left behind. He had no noble blood, no divine destiny, just a man whose life had been saved at the expense of another. He needed answers, and the only way to find them was to keep moving. The man began to walk, leaving the wreckage of the battlefield behind him. As he moved, his thoughts became a torrent, questions without answers. Memories of the moment she whispered to him, her hand guiding his weak fingers to the spear. He could still feel the chill of her touch, still hear her final words. Use it wisely. The landscape before him was barren, as if mirroring the emptiness he felt inside. The ruins of an ancient city loomed ahead, its crumbling towers reaching for a sky that was turning darker with each passing hour. He had heard stories of this place, a place where the old world's secrets were buried, hidden away by time and forgotten by most. Perhaps there he could find answers. Perhaps there he could learn about the spear, about the woman who had given him life, and why. With determination settling in his chest, the man pressed on. The path to the ruins was not an easy one. The terrain was rocky and unforgiving, and the further he ventured, the more the weight of his mission began to press on his shoulders. He was no longer just a soldier, no longer just a survivor. He was now a man bound by a purpose he barely understood. His life had been exchanged for hers, and now it was his responsibility to discover why. Night began to fall as he reached the outskirts of the ancient city, the eerie silence broken only by the distant howl of the wind. The ruins seemed to watch him, as if the very stones held the memories of those who had once lived here. He felt the weight of history pressing down on him, but it was a history he had no part in, and yet he felt inexplicably drawn to it. In the fading light, the man entered the city's remains, his eyes searching for something, anything, that could explain the strange turn his life had taken. What was this power she had given him? What was it about the spear? And most importantly, who was she, truly? He had only known her for a brief moment, but it felt like a lifetime. A lifetime he would now carry within him, with all its questions, all its mysteries. Each step deeper into the ruins brought him closer to the truth. He could feel it in his bones. The answers, he was certain, lay somewhere in the shadows of this forgotten place, and he would find them, no matter the cost. The city's ruins were unlike anything he had seen before. The architecture was ancient, yet strangely sophisticated stone structures that seemed to rise from the earth itself, their surfaces etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly in the moonlight. It felt as if the city was waiting for him, its secrets hidden in plain sight, just out of reach. The man moved cautiously through the shattered streets, his footsteps echoing against the stone. There was an unsettling stillness here, the kind of silence that presses on your ears, making every breath feel too loud. He could almost feel the weight of time pressing down on him, as if the city itself had been abandoned for centuries and yet, somehow, still watched over by forces he couldn't comprehend. He had come here seeking answers, but now that he was standing at the heart of this forgotten place, uncertainty crept in. What if the answers he sought weren't meant to be found? What if, by even stepping foot in this place, he was walking into a trap, into a destiny he had no control over? But he couldn't turn back. He couldn't go back to the battlefield, to the woman's death. The questions would gnaw at him forever if he didn't find the truth. The sacrifice she made, it deserved to be understood. It deserved to mean something more than just the end of her life. There had to be a reason for it, and he would find it, even if it meant walking through the shadows of this ancient city alone. As he walked deeper into the ruins, he noticed the stone walls were covered in strange carvings. They were not just random etchings, they were a language he didn't understand, but one that felt oddly familiar. It was as if his mind recognized the patterns, even if his conscious thoughts didn't. The symbols seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, almost as if they were alive, reacting to his presence. He stopped in front of a large, crumbling archway, the entrance to what appeared to be a temple of sorts. The air around it felt different, charged, thick with the weight of something ancient, something powerful. His hand instinctively went to the spear strapped to his back, the woman's spear, the one that had saved him, the one that had killed her. He hesitated for a moment, but then, driven by an unseen force, he stepped into the dark passage. The inside of the temple was dimly lit, the walls lined with more of those strange symbols. At the far end, he saw something glowing faintly, an altar or perhaps a pedestal. It was impossible to tell from this distance, but the glow seemed to pull at him, like a magnet drawing him toward the truth. As he walked toward the light, a feeling of dread began to settle in his chest. It was as if the city itself knew what he was seeking and was warning him to turn back. But he couldn't, not now, not when he was so close. The woman's face flashed in his mind, her eyes, full of determination, full of a purpose he still didn't fully understand. She had given him life, and he had to honor it. He had to find the purpose behind her sacrifice. The man reached the pedestal, and there, resting upon it, was an artifact, a stone tablet, covered in the same symbols that covered the city. But this one was different. It hummed with a strange energy, something more potent than he had ever felt. As his hand brushed against it, the symbols on the tablet began to shift, rearranging themselves as if responding to his touch. Suddenly, a vision exploded in his mind. A flash of images, vivid, chaotic, yet strangely clear. He saw the warrior woman, her face filled with resolve as she held the spear, her hand reaching out toward someone. He saw the city, flourishing, its people thriving. And then, he saw destruction, battles fought, lives lost, the very city crumbling. The woman was there, at the heart of it, and he understood then the spear, the power it held, was both a gift and a curse. He pulled his hand away from the tablet, his heart racing. The vision had been so real, so overwhelming, that for a moment, he wasn't sure if he was still standing in the ruins, or if he had crossed into another realm entirely. But one thing was clear now: the spear, the woman, the sacrifice. It was all part of something much larger, something he could no longer ignore. The man stood frozen in the dim light of the temple, the vision still burning in his mind. The images of the woman, the city, the battles, they were like fragments of a shattered mirror, each piece reflecting a reality that seemed just beyond his reach. But there was something he understood now, something that echoed through the dark corners of his soul. This was no mere battle, no simple act of sacrifice. The warrior woman had chosen him for a reason. He was a part of something far greater than he could comprehend. As the echo of the vision faded, the weight of the tablet in his hand felt heavier, more significant. He turned it over slowly, as if expecting it to reveal some new secret. But the symbols remained unchanged, silent. The tablet, like the city around him, held its mysteries close, unwilling to reveal everything at once. He could feel the pulse of energy inside it, a force that seemed to reach out to him, waiting for something. Without fully understanding why, he placed the tablet into his pack, his hands trembling as he did so. His journey had only just begun, and already the answers were slipping away from him, like sand through his fingers. But there was one thing he knew for certain: the woman's death had not been in vain. She had left him with more than just a second chance at life. She had left him with a mission. The man left the temple, the heavy weight of the tablet now pulling him toward a future he hadn't planned. The world outside was still silent, but there was something different now. The air felt charged with purpose, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to hum with energy. As he walked through the ruins, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was following him. But when he turned, there was nothing, just the vast emptiness of the ancient city, stretching out before him. He didn't know where to go next, but instinct told him to keep moving. The vision had shown him something about the spear, about the woman's sacrifice, but there was still so much he didn't understand. What was the true power of the spear? And why had the woman chosen him to carry it forward? His thoughts were interrupted by a distant sound, a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the ground. The man's heart raced, his senses on high alert. He wasn't alone, and whatever was out there, it wasn't friendly. He crouched low, moving silently through the wreckage of the city, the shadows growing longer as the night deepened. His eyes darted from one corner to the next, searching for any sign of movement. The growls grew louder, closer now. He could feel the presence of something large, moving through the ruins, its steps heavy and deliberate. Without warning, a shape lunged from the shadows, a creature, half beast, half machine, its glowing eyes locking onto him. The man barely had time to react as the creature's claws slashed through the air, narrowly missing his face. He dove to the side, drawing the spear from his back in one smooth motion. The blade gleamed in the fading light, its power resonating with the man's own strength. He met the creature's next strike with the spear, the energy of the weapon crackling through the air as it sliced through the creature's metal armor. The beast howled in pain, but the man didn't stop. He couldn't. This was not just survival anymore. This was something more. As the creature staggered back, the man's grip tightened on the spear. He was not just fighting for his own life. He was fighting for the woman's sacrifice. He was fighting for the future she had entrusted to him, and he would not let it slip away. The spear pulsed with energy, and in that moment, he felt its power surge through him once again. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The creature lunged again, but this time, the man was prepared. With one swift motion, he drove the spear into its heart. The beast let out a final, guttural cry before collapsing into the dust. The man stood over the creature's body, his breath heavy but steady. The power of the spear had done what he could not have done alone, and for the first time since he had been saved, he felt a flicker of hope. The journey ahead would be long, and he still had much to learn. But the woman's sacrifice had not been in vain. He had the strength to carry on, and he would. The man stood in the aftermath of the battle, his chest rising and falling with each breath. The creature's body lay still, its once glowing eyes now dim. Its monstrous form crumpled at his feet. He didn't feel victorious, only drained, as if the very essence of the fight had drained from him, leaving nothing but an empty shell. He had killed the creature, yes, but it wasn't just the beast he was fighting anymore. It was something deeper, something he still didn't understand. The spear hummed quietly in his hand, its power still pulsing through him, but it felt different now. The energy, once so raw and alive, seemed more like a weight, a responsibility he had never asked for. The woman's final words echoed in his mind, "Use it wisely." How could he wield such power when he didn't even know the full extent of what it could do? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruined city, the man felt a strange pull within him, as if something far larger than himself was watching, waiting. He knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There were more questions than answers, and with every step he took, it seemed the truth grew more elusive. His mind wandered back to the vision he had seen in the temple. The destruction, the power of the spear, the woman's face. Was it possible that the city had fallen because of the spear's power? Could it be that the weapon itself was the source of the destruction, and the woman had given her life to keep it from consuming everything? He couldn't let that be the case. He couldn't let her death be meaningless. There had to be another way, another reason for what she had done. And so, with renewed resolve, the man began to move through the city once again, following an instinct he couldn't explain. The ruins were silent now, save for the faint whispers of wind that danced through the shattered structures. It was as if the very city held its breath, waiting for him to uncover whatever secret it was hiding. As he ventured deeper, he came upon what appeared to be an ancient library, its doors broken, its walls crumbling, but still standing against time's relentless march. Inside, dust and cobwebs filled the air, but there was a sense of reverence in the place, as if the knowledge it held was far too important to be forgotten. The man carefully stepped inside, his eyes scanning the shelves, his fingers brushing against the spines of ancient tomes and scrolls. It was there, buried beneath layers of time and dust, that he found it a book unlike the others. It was bound in dark leather, its cover embossed with symbols he had seen before, symbols that matched the carvings in the temple. His heart raced as he carefully opened the pages, his eyes scanning the text. It was a language he didn't understand, but as he read, the symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves in his mind, the meaning becoming clear. The book spoke of the spear, a weapon forged by the Ancient Ones, a tool of life and death, capable of bending the very fabric of existence. But with its power came a terrible cost. Those who wielded it were destined to either destroy or protect, and it was said that only one person in each generation could truly understand the spear's purpose. The man's heart sank as he realized what it meant. The warrior woman had known this. She had known that he was the one who could either save the world or doom it to the same fate. That had befallen her people. The weight of it hit him like a physical blow. The choice he faced was no longer just about survival. It was about the future of everything. The woman had sacrificed herself to give him this chance, but it wasn't just a gift, it was a test. And the man knew that the path ahead would not be simple. As the words sank in, a cold wind stirred, and the man turned to face the door. Outside, the darkness had deepened, but there was a strange light on the horizon, a faint glow that seemed to call to him. It was time to face the truth, time to make a choice. The spear had given him life, but it had also given him a burden he could no longer ignore. With a final glance at the book, the man gathered his strength and stepped back into the shadows of the ruined city. ready to uncover the next piece of the puzzle that would determine his fate and the fate of the world. The man stood at the edge of the crumbling city, the weight of the spear heavy in his grasp. The wind howled, swirling dust around him, but his focus remained sharp. The horizon was bathed in the cold light of the rising moon, and in the distance, he could see the faint glow of what he had come to understand as the heart of his journey, the place where everything would be decided. He had learned much since the day the warrior woman had saved him. Her sacrifice, the spear, the ancient book, it had all led him to this moment, this choice. The future was no longer a series of events stretching out before him. It was a fork in the road, where every step could either heal the broken world or push it further toward destruction. His mind raced with the possibilities. The book had made it clear that the spear could heal, but it could also devastate. The ancient ones had used it to protect their people, but when their greed grew, the spear had turned against them. Power like this was always a double-edged sword. He could feel it in his very bones, the temptation to wield the spear for his own gain, to reshape the world according to his will. But that path, the book warned, led to ruin. The man closed his eyes and remembered the woman's face, the fire in her eyes, as she had handed him the spear, the peace she had shown in her final moments. She had known what was at stake. She had understood the cost of the power she had given him. And now, it was his turn to make the same choice. The silence of the night was broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. The storm that had been brewing for days was finally here. The air smelled of rain, but there was something else, something ominous lurking in the atmosphere. The storm was a reflection of the turmoil inside him, a storm he could no longer ignore. He knew he had to act. The world was waiting, and the spear, pulsing with untapped energy, was in his hands. But what would he do with it? How could he ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated? How could he prevent the spear from becoming the instrument of destruction it had once been? His thoughts turned to the people, the survivors of the war, the ones who had lost everything. They had been left behind, abandoned by the very powers that had promised to protect them. The man had seen the desolation in their eyes, the hopelessness. But it didn't have to be that way. He could change it. He could use the spear to heal the land, to restore what had been lost. But the voice of caution whispered in his mind. The power of the spear was not a gift, it was a responsibility. It was not something to be wielded lightly, not by a man who had no true understanding of its potential. He had seen how power had corrupted the ancient ones, how their greed had led to their downfall. Could he resist that same temptation? Could he use the spear for good, without falling into the same traps? The man looked down at the spear in his hands, the ancient symbols etched into its surface glowing faintly in the moonlight. It was a weapon, yes, but it was also more than that. It was a symbol of hope, of life, of sacrifice. The woman had given her life to save him. She had trusted him with its power, knowing that only he could decide its fate. And that, more than anything, was what weighed on his heart, the trust she had placed in him. He clenched the spear tightly, feeling its power surge through him, and made his decision. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be obstacles, battles to fight, and temptations to resist. But he could not allow the mistakes of the past to define the future. He would use the spear to heal, to protect, and to rebuild. He would not let the woman's sacrifice be in vain. As the storm broke overhead, the first drops of rain fell, washing away the dust and ash that had settled on the land. It was a new beginning, a beginning he would lead, with the spear as his guide, and the memory of the warrior woman's sacrifice as his strength. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, the man felt a sense of purpose, a sense of clarity. The future was his to shape, and he would not waste it.